Mistress sent a gift to the millionaire, his pregnant wife, opened it, and discovered a hidden note. A single luxurious parcel was delivered to the prestigious Winston estate one crisp morning, catching everyone by surprise. Amid the well-tended lawns and regal columns, the gift glimmered with promise, but inside lay a secret capable of shattering an entire world. Elizabeth Winston, glowing with the radiance of impending motherhood, carefully opened the box. Wrapped around a delicate silver rattle was a chilling note that hinted at betrayal, seduction, and hidden truths about her beloved millionaire husband, David Winston. What followed ignited a whirlwind of deception and desperation, testing bonds of loyalty and love in ways no one could have anticipated. David Winston was born into privilege, yet he prided himself on forging his own path. His father, Gregory Winston, was a respected lawyer who once represented corporate giants like Apple and Tesla. Growing up, David observed power brokers frequenting their Hampton estate for lavish summer gatherings. He learned early on that connections were currency, and charm was its most persuasive exchange rate. Despite the gilded life, David had always yearned to step beyond his father's shadow. He graduated from Harvard with a degree in economics, then plunged into real estate development. By 30, he had made a name for himself as a deal-maker with vision and grit, expanding his empire from Manhattan's financial district to the revitalized neighborhoods in Los Angeles. That success brought fortune, recognition, and eventually a restless hunger for something more thrilling than boardroom negotiations. He found that excitement, briefly, in a woman named Alicia Moretti. A month before the parcel arrived at the Winston mansion, David had crossed paths with Alicia at an upscale lounge in Milan. What began as a casual discussion about a potential real estate partnership evolved into shared confidences over wine, culminating in an act of betrayal he never intended to repeat. Afterward, he suppressed the guilt and told himself it was a momentary lapse in judgment. Alicia returned to Europe, and David focused on his wife, Elizabeth Winston, who was then in her second trimester of pregnancy. Elizabeth, for her part, was the perfect hostess and partner. Raised in a modest family from Connecticut, she embraced philanthropy and championed education causes, especially for underprivileged children. People saw her as the elegant and compassionate anchor that tempered David's entrepreneurial drive. She dedicated her days to managing charitable foundations, forging networks with other high society philanthropists, and preparing for the arrival of their first child. Elizabeth trusted David implicitly until the morning a mysterious package arrived, its tasteful gold ribbons suggesting a congratulatory gift for the baby they both anticipated. Elizabeth remembered that morning as distinctly as a dream on the edge of fading. She was in the foyer, sorting through baby shower deliveries. She picked up the parcel, noticing the refined calligraphy that spelled out Elizabeth Winston on a neat white card. Inside, she discovered a glimmering silver baby rattle bound by a black ribbon, oddly formal for a celebratory token. Beneath the ribbon was a note. "Don't let him fool you. Ask him about Milan, and why you deserve the truth." In an instant, her heart hammered. She reread the words, unsure if they were meant for her or if someone had made a terrible mistake. The reference to Milan pricked her memory. David had traveled there. Was this from a disgruntled client, an overzealous reporter, or something far more personal? Though panic fluttered in her chest, Elizabeth fought to keep calm. She dialed David's number. It went to voicemail. She left a trembling message, her mind racing, trying to find explanations. Little did she know, the note was just the first crack in a carefully constructed facade that threatened to crumble under the weight of jealousy, lies, and longing. Elizabeth tried to carry on with her daily tasks, but her mind wandered back to the ominous note again and again. She placed the silver rattle on an end table in her study, unable to ignore the unsettling glare it seemed to cast. Every time she glanced at it, she felt a twinge of dread. That afternoon, Elizabeth walked through the estate's gardens in search of solace. Vast hydrangea bushes and rows of tulips provided a burst of colour, but she found no comfort in their beauty. Her thoughts tumbled uncontrollably. Could David be in danger? Could their child be threatened? The message was cryptic enough to imply blackmail or personal vendetta. She confided in her closest friend, Cynthia Parker, a reserved but astute confidant. Cynthia, whose philanthropic ties often overlapped with Elizabeth's, was visiting to discuss an upcoming fundraiser. Over a glass of lavender-infused iced tea, Elizabeth revealed the note. Cynthia read it, her eyebrows knitting together. "Eliza, do you suspect David might be entangled in something questionable?" she asked gently. She knew Elizabeth's loyalty to her husband, but there was no denying the note's insinuation. Elizabeth hesitated. She'd never doubted David's love or devotion. At worst, she assumed it might be a disgruntled business partner or a competitor aiming to stir drama. "No," she finally said, though her voice wavered. "David's always been direct about his business dealings. This must be someone's twisted joke or a ploy." Cynthia reached for her friend's hand. "Perhaps you should talk to him before jumping to any conclusions. See what he knows. It might be nothing." Yet, Elizabeth couldn't shake a creeping suspicion. The note's explicit reference to Milan pointed to something personal. For all of David's transparency, she recalled how distant he had been when he first returned from that trip, exhausted. Yes, but also evasive. He had dismissed her questions about how the negotiations went, claiming it was complicated. Then, as weeks passed, he resumed normalcy. Now, alarm bells rang in Elizabeth's head. Once Cynthia left, Elizabeth tried David's phone again. Still no answer. Anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. She settled herself in the living room, opening her laptop to review David's public calendar. There it was, a business trip to Los Angeles for a possible joint project in Beverly Hills. His flight was due to land that evening. She typed a message, voice quivering with frustration. "David, please call me the minute you land. It's urgent." She hit send, adrenaline surging in her veins. As the day turned to dusk, Elizabeth indulged in a deep bath to calm her nerves. Warm water, scented with rose oil, enveloped her. She placed a protective hand on her belly, feeling faint flutters from the life growing inside. Her maternal instincts told her that stability and honesty mattered now more than ever. If David was in trouble, or if he'd done something that could tear them apart, Elizabeth needed to know. Across the country, David Winston hustled out of a marathon meeting with a high-stakes development team. His phone was in his briefcase, notifications piling up unnoticed. By the time he saw Elizabeth's messages, it was nearly midnight in New York. Alarmed by the tone in her voicemail, he booked the earliest flight home. When Elizabeth finally heard David's voice on the line, she almost broke down in relief. "I'll explain everything when I get back," he promised. But in her heart, Elizabeth knew that no matter how they handled it, the life they once enjoyed without suspicion was gone. The silver rattle in her study had cast a new, icy shadow over their world, and the darkness would only deepen once secrets came to light. David arrived at the Winston mansion under a grey morning sky. A gentle drizzle soaked the manicured lawns, accentuating the sense of gloom Elizabeth felt since receiving the note. She greeted him in the foyer, her expression a mixture of relief and simmering anxiety. Without a word, she led him into his study, an opulent room with mahogany shelves, leather-bound books, and a fireplace that remained unlit. On the desk lay the rattle and the note. David's breath caught when he read the latter, his face momentarily contorting with panic. He tried to mask it, but Elizabeth saw everything. He set the paper down and pressed his fingertips to his temples, as though trying to compose himself. "Elizabeth," he began, voice carefully measured. "This is likely a hoax. People do this sort of thing to sow discord, especially when they see wealth. Please don't be alarmed." She studied him. "Why does it mention Milan, David? Why specifically that trip?" "The note says, I deserve the truth." "The truth about what?" David forced a small shrug. "We closed a tough negotiation in Milan. Some parties were unhappy with the final terms. It could be someone's way of retaliating." He avoided her gaze as he spoke, and Elizabeth's chest tightened with a blend of fear and anger. She quietly lifted the rattle, holding it up. "Who sends a baby gift with a hidden threat? This goes beyond business grievances." "It feels personal." Her words hung in the still air. For a second, David considered revealing everything that he had met Alicia Moretti, that their one night together was a lapse in judgment he desperately regretted. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to see the heartbreak that would flood Elizabeth's face. Not now. He believed he could solve this problem without devastating her. "Let me handle it," he said at last. "I promise. I'll investigate. I'll contact my security team, see if they can trace the sender." Elizabeth wanted to press further, to demand he come clean, but her voice caught in her throat. She had always valued honesty in marriage, but was she prepared to face a painful confession if it came to that? "All right," she whispered, placing the rattle back on the desk. "But don't shut me out, David. Whatever this is, we're in it together." He nodded, stepping closer to squeeze her hands. The tenderness in his eyes was genuine, yet beneath it lurked guilt. Outside, the drizzle persisted, a low patter against the windows. David made a show of calling his head of security, instructing them to track any suspicious packages or communications. He sent messages to his business associates in Milan, asking if they'd received similar threats. Yet beneath the surface, David knew the truth. Alicia Moretti had proven she was unafraid to disrupt his life. He recalled her luminous eyes, her playful smirk, the way she'd looked at him in that Milan hotel lounge, a mixture of fascination and promise. She had told him she was from Rome, working in property consulting. After they fell into each other's arms, she left him with the impression that it was a fleeting encounter, her flight back to Europe serving as a quick and clean escape. But evidently, Alicia had other ideas. Watching Elizabeth, David felt a pang of remorse. She looked wan, her pregnancy glow overshadowed by fear. He wished he could rewind time, or, at the very least, handle Alicia's intrusion quietly. If only that note were the end of it, but deep down, he suspected it was merely the opening shot in a war Alicia intended to wage. Days stretched on, and the Winston estate took on an uneasy atmosphere. Elizabeth went about her usual routines, meeting with interior decorators for the nursery, reviewing proposals for her educational foundation, and checking in regularly with her OB-GYN. Yet a lingering apprehension dogged her, fueled by David's uncharacteristic caginess. In an attempt to quell her doubts, Elizabeth sought out Robert Caldwell, an old friend and former classmate of David's at Harvard. Robert was one of the few people who knew David both personally and professionally. If anyone could help verify whether David's business in Milan had been potentially dangerous or shady, it would be Robert. They met at a chic midtown cafe, discreetly secluded in a corner booth. Over cappuccinos, Elizabeth hesitated before speaking, uncertain about how much to divulge. Eventually, she drew the mysterious note from her purse and slid it across the table. Robert's eyes widened as he read. "This is intense," he commented, keeping his voice low, mentioning Milan. Well, that is where David was handling a major property acquisition. Deals can turn nasty, but this... He pointed at the baby rattle in the photograph Elizabeth had snapped with her phone. "This is strange." Elizabeth sipped her coffee, trying to steady her voice. "I'm worried, Robert. David's being evasive. We've had threats in the past from disgruntled competitors or protesters, but never something so personal. I keep wondering if there's more to it. Robert laid a gentle hand on her arm. I know David better than most. He's proud, but rarely dishonest. If he's hiding something, he might believe it's for the greater good, or because he's deeply ashamed. Either way, secrets will eventually unravel. Elizabeth nodded, relief warring with anxiety. She felt vindicated in her suspicions, but equally terrified of confronting what they might unveil. I just want the truth. Robert grimaced sympathetically. I can discreetly ask around. If there's a business angle to this, I'll find out. But Elizabeth, the first, brace yourself. If David is keeping something secret, it might not be about money or contracts. Her cheeks colored, you think? Robert hesitated, then met her eyes. Marriage can be complicated. You're both high-profile, wealthy, and busy. Sometimes mistakes happen. The suggestion hung between them like a foul odor. Elizabeth's stomach twisted. She thanked Robert and left, her heart pounding. The possibility of an affair had crossed her mind more than once, but every time she dismissed it, unwilling to believe David could betray her, especially now with a baby on the way. When she returned to the mansion, she found David in the upstairs lounge, scanning through documents on his tablet. He looked up, forcing a thin smile. Hey, where have you been? Out, she replied simply. She studied him, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the subtle tension lining his face. He seemed haunted, even frightened. What's he so afraid of losing, she wondered. Me, or the child, or everything else? As Elizabeth walked down the corridor, the faint hum of the staff's daily bustle surrounded her. She paused outside the future nursery, lightly touching the door. Inside, pastel paint swatches covered the walls. Baby furnishings, half assembled, awaited final arrangement. There was a dream in that room, a dream of a loving family, of laughter and security. Yet outside, a storm gathered. Elizabeth could sense it creeping ever closer. In a quiet moment, she made a decision. If David refused to reveal the whole truth, she would find it herself, even if it meant uncovering something she dreaded. She couldn't bring an innocent child into a home built on secrets and lies. While Elizabeth wrestled with her suspicions, Alicia Moretti prowled the glossy corridors of an upscale Manhattan hotel under an assumed name. She had arrived from Italy just days earlier, determined to stake her claim or exact her revenge on David Winston. Dressed in a tailored black suit, she looked every inch the elegant business consultant she once was, a veneer that concealed her tumultuous emotions. Alicia had once believed she wouldn't see David again. Their night in Milan was a confluence of desire and loneliness. She told herself it was just business that led them to a private hotel lounge, but the spark was instantaneous. They talked, laughed, confided in each other. David spoke of feeling trapped under the weight of expectations, of how, despite all his wealth, he sometimes felt empty. Alicia found herself mesmerized by his candor. Then, in the hush of moonlit hours, they crossed a line that neither could uncross. When David returned to New York, Alicia tried to move on. She immersed herself in work, even toyed with other romantic prospects. But David's memory lingered. She had glimpsed a man who, beneath the polished exterior, was searching for something he couldn't quite define. Eventually, Alicia's longing twisted into anger when he ignored her messages. He severed contact, treating her as a disposable secret. The note with the silver rattle was her opening salvo. She wanted to rattle Elizabeth's perfect world, as David had rattled her sense of self. Now that she was in New York, Alicia fully intended to see how far she could push him. She had sent more letters, some addressed directly to David's office to ensure his staff might glimpse them. Subtle references to their time in Milan, ironically couched in business terms, so no one but David would grasp the true implications. Late that evening, Alicia dialed David's private number. It went straight to voicemail. Perhaps he recognized her new local line. She left a measured message. "I'm in Manhattan now. We need to talk about us and your wife. You know how to reach me. Don't make me wait." She ended the call, a pulse of adrenaline thrumming through her. Part of her felt guilty for targeting Elizabeth, a woman who, by all accounts, was kind and genuinely devoted. But the logic of betrayal rarely conformed to compassion. Alicia's pride demanded recognition. If David insisted on burying her memory, she would force him to confront it. Setting the phone aside, Alicia gazed out the hotel window at the Manhattan skyline. She recalled the tapestry of light that once framed their conversation in Milan. Their affair had been so brief, yet so intense. Did David truly think she would vanish like a whisper? She wouldn't, not without answers, not without extracting some measure of restitution for her pain. Unknown to Alicia, Elizabeth was growing more determined in her own pursuit of answers. And David, caught in the middle, had begun to crumble under the strain of concealing the truth. The stage was set for an explosive confrontation, one that would shake the very foundations of the Winston family, and all the illusions that came with it. Elizabeth woke one early morning with a sense of conviction. Sleep had eluded her, leaving her thoughts churning in an endless loop of suspicions. She decided to hire a private investigator. If David refused to tell her anything substantial, she would uncover the facts herself. It felt disloyal, even invasive, but the well-being of their unborn child overshadowed her doubts. She contacted Jonathan Pierce, a seasoned investigator with a discreet reputation. He had handled sensitive cases for other influential families, ensuring minimal public fallout. When he arrived at the Winston mansion, his calm demeanor and warm handshake reassured Elizabeth that she'd chosen the right person for the job. Pierce sat in the study, leaning forward in a leather armchair. "Miss S. Winston," he said in a measured tone, "what exactly do you suspect?" Elizabeth hesitated, then showed him the note and the photograph of the silver rattle. She didn't mention Alicia by name because she didn't know it yet. All she knew was the cryptic reference to Milan. I suspect David has secrets involving someone connected to his Milan trip." A friend suggested it could be personal. Pierce studied her carefully. "Are you prepared for the possibility of an affair?" He asked the question gently, but the words still cut Elizabeth like a blade. She swallowed, tears threatening. "I don't know, but I need to protect myself and my child." Pierce nodded in understanding. He requested any travel records or contact lists that Elizabeth could access. Reluctantly, she shared David's itinerary from Milan, gleaned from forwarded emails and credit card statements. She also handed over a list of phone numbers David frequently called during that period. Pierce's expression remained neutral, but Elizabeth sensed he was methodical and thorough. Outside the mansion, the sky was a bright winter blue, crisp and clear. Pierce left, promising discreet updates. Elizabeth felt equal parts shame and relief for going behind. David's back, relief at finally taking control. That same day, she noticed David pacing in his private study, phone in hand. His posture screamed tension. Elizabeth lingered by the door, overhearing fragments of his conversation. "Can't keep this up," he murmured, voice taut. "We need to settle this now. I won't let it ruin—" His words died when he spotted Elizabeth. He ended the call abruptly and offered a strained smile. "Work," he claimed, "a meltdown with some West Coast investors." She nodded, forcing herself not to confront him with her suspicions. Soon, she told herself, Pierce would bring clarity. She prayed it wouldn't confirm her worst fears. That night, Elizabeth lay awake, listening to the soft rhythm of David's breathing beside her. She gently placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the baby move. This life stirring inside her deserved stability, love, and honesty. If David had strayed, they would need to confront it. If the threat was purely business, they could handle it together. but the gnawing ache of uncertainty loomed as large as the darkness in their grand bedroom. Outside, the wind whistled across the empty gardens, hinting at storms yet to come. Within days, Jonathan Pierce's investigation began to yield whispers of a name: Alicia Moretti. Her presence in Milan overlapped suspiciously with David's trip, and multiple discreet sources confirmed sightings of them together. She was described as an Italian real estate consultant, charming, beautiful, and sometimes cagey about her personal background. Pierce quietly relayed the information to Elizabeth in a phone call. "Your husband may have had more than business dealings with her," Pierce said gently. "I've obtained security footage from the hotel in Milan. It's not explicit, but it shows them leaving the lounge together late at night." Elizabeth's chest tightened. She felt hot tears prickling at her eyes. So it was true. David had been with another woman. Yet she held on to a sliver of doubt. Could it have been an innocent meeting that spilled late into the night? "Send me the footage," she replied. Her voice shook, but she maintained composure. "And keep digging. If she's in New York, I need to know." After the call ended, Elizabeth stared at the nursery door again. The baby kicked, a reminder that there was more at stake than her own heartbreak. She whispered softly to her unborn child, promising them love and security no matter what. That evening, David approached Elizabeth at dinner with a nervous energy. The staff had prepared a simple meal: chicken marsala, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. Elizabeth barely touched her plate, swirling her fork listlessly. "You're not eating," he remarked, frowning. She looked up. "I'm just not hungry." David cleared his throat. "I've hired additional security. Whoever sent that note won't bother us again." His eyes darted away, as though he didn't believe his own words. Elizabeth set her fork down. She mustered courage. What if it's not about threats? What if it's someone who feels wronged by you personally? David froze, color draining from his face. He tried to respond, but his voice wavered. I don't know what you mean." Before he could say more, the phone rang. David leaped to answer it, almost relieved by the interruption. Elizabeth closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. She didn't press further, but she knew a reckoning was near. Meanwhile, Alicia Moretti refined her plan from her temporary residence in Manhattan. She had just received a cryptic message from a lawyer friend in Italy, warning her that Winston's investigators were sniffing around. She welcomed the cat-and-mouse game, certain that David was close to unraveling. She swirled a glass of red wine, recalling the hushed lullabies of conversation she and David once shared. "I loved how he listened," she thought bitterly, "how he made me feel cherished for that fleeting night." With each swirl of her wine, her anger bubbled anew. She typed a message to David, unambiguous in its threat. "You're pushing me to act. Your wife deserves the entire truth. I'm happy to provide it if you won't." She pressed send. Her heart pounded, both dreading and craving his reply. A part of her wished he would call and apologize, promise something grand, but she knew that was fantasy. In reality, Alicia had decided to see how far she could stretch David's composure before he shattered. She wouldn't vanish quietly. Not anymore. In the Winston mansion, a hush followed dinner. David read Alicia's text, a cold sweat forming at his brow. This was it. The walls were closing in. Outside the window, darkness cloaked the expansive grounds. He glanced at Elizabeth, who stared vacantly into the flickering fireplace. He wondered if she already knew, or if she was giving him one last chance to come clean. The tension in the air was palpable, setting the stage for revelations that would upend their lives. Another week passed, and the tension became unbearable. Elizabeth oscillated between anger and devastation. She would catch David checking his phone at odd hours, anxiety etched on his face. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pierce's updates became more definitive. Alicia Moretti was indeed in New York, staying in a high-end hotel under an assumed name. She had been spotted near David's office building, possibly hoping to intercept him. One afternoon, Elizabeth's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sure you've heard my name by now. If you want the truth from me, I'll be at the Blue Ember Jazz Lounge tonight, 9 p.m. Alicia." Elizabeth's pulse thundered. She could scarcely believe Alicia had contacted her directly. Part of her felt an overwhelming urge to confront this woman, while another part wanted to hide from the damning truth. She decided to show David the message. If nothing else, she needed to gauge his reaction. She found him in the parlor, reviewing documents while classical music played softly in the background. Handing him her phone, Elizabeth watched his eyes widen as he read the text. He swallowed hard, color draining from his cheeks. "Elizabeth, you can't go. Let me handle it." She set her jaw, her voice tight. "This is my marriage, my child. I have every right to confront her if I choose." His lips parted, searching for a rebuttal, but after a moment he realized there was no argument to be made. "I'll come with you," he finally said, fear and resignation mingling in his tone. "We'll face her together." That evening, they arrived at the Blue Ember Jazz Lounge, a dimly lit venue known for its sultry ambience and soulful performances. A pianist on stage swayed to a gentle melody, the notes drifting through the air like a melancholic lullaby. Elizabeth clutched David's arm, scanning the crowd. At a corner table, a woman with sleek black hair and striking features sipped a martini. Their eyes locked. Alicia Moretti stood as they approached, her demeanor poised yet electric with tension. She wore a fitted black dress, a statement of confidence and allure. David stiffened beside Elizabeth, a silent acknowledgement that he had indeed shared an intimacy with this woman. Alicia gestured to a nearby chair. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Elizabeth sank into the seat, acutely aware of her racing heart. David remained standing, his fists clenched. Alicia's gaze flicked between them, a faint sneer curling her lips. "I assume David has told you everything by now," Alicia said, eyes glittering in the low light. Elizabeth remained silent. Her voice threatened to crack if she spoke. David finally found words. "Alicia, this is madness. Why are you doing this?" She lifted a sardonic eyebrow. "Because you used me. You made me believe there was something more between us, then vanished. I want you to feel an ounce of the hurt and humiliation I felt." She turned her attention to Elizabeth. "He neglected to mention me, I assume?" Elizabeth's lips trembled. He said it was business." Alicia's laugh was bitter. "It was business, until it wasn't. Do you know how easy it was to fall for his charm? I thought maybe he'd change everything for me. But that was naive." David's shoulders sagged under the weight of his own guilt. "I didn't promise you anything, Alicia. I was foolish, yes, but I never told you I'd leave Elizabeth." Alicia's gaze hardened. "You acted like a man, starved for something real. Now you have to face the consequences." Elizabeth felt tears burn her eyes. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "So this is what you wanted?" she asked Alicia. "To humiliate me while I'm carrying his child?" A shadow of regret flickered across Alicia's face, but she remained resolute. "I'm sorry you're caught in this, but I won't be ignored or tossed aside." Before anyone could say more, Alicia lifted her purse from the table and walked away. David stood there, stunned. Elizabeth stared at the half-finished martini, her emotions swirling in a tempest of betrayal and sorrow. The lounge's soft jazz carried on as though nothing extraordinary had happened, while the three players in this tragic drama recognized that no matter how they tried to bury the past, it had forced its way into the present, demanding a final reckoning. Elizabeth and David left the lounge in stunned silence, neither sure what to say. Outside, New York's neon lights blurred in the chilly evening air. A light drizzle misted the sidewalk, reflecting the turmoil roiling inside them. Their driver opened the town car door, but Elizabeth paused, looking up at David with eyes that brimmed with pain. "How could you do this?" she whispered. "We're having a child, David. Did that not mean anything to you?" He swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. "It means everything, Elizabeth. I was lost. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." Her tears finally spilled, one moment or several. Alicia implied more than a single encounter. David hesitated, his silence speaking volumes. He eventually mumbled, "A few meetings. They were mostly about business until I crossed the line. I never meant for it to continue." Elizabeth's chest tightened with a raw ache. She turned away and stepped into the car. David followed, the door shutting behind him. The ride back to the Winston mansion was a suffocating cloud of tension. He reached for Elizabeth's hand, but she recoiled, pressing herself against the opposite door. When they arrived, Elizabeth swiftly exited, heading upstairs without a word. David remained in the foyer, shoulders heavy as he contemplated the magnitude of what he'd done. The staff, accustomed to polished smiles and gracious greetings, watched in hushed concern, sensing the turmoil but not daring to intervene. In her bedroom, Elizabeth locked the door. She sank onto the bed, sobbing into a pillow. The baby kicked, stirring her to gather her composure. She steadied her breathing, pressing a hand to her belly. "I'm not alone," she reminded herself. "I have this child." Minutes later, David knocked softly. "Elizabeth, please, open the door. I need to explain." She lifted herself from the bed and wiped her tears before opening the door a crack. "Explain, then," she said flatly, arms folded over her chest. David's eyes glistened, his usual poise shredded by guilt and desperation. "It happened after a tough negotiation," he began, voice shaking. "Alicia and I kept meeting, discussing a real estate partnership. She was clever, charming. I felt an attraction I couldn't resist at the time. After that night, I realized it was a huge mistake. I tried to end it." Elizabeth clenched her jaw, tears threatening again. "So you cast her aside and assumed she'd go quietly? Did you not once think how catastrophic this would be for me, for our child?" He reached for her hand, but she pulled away again. "I was arrogant enough to think I could handle it," he admitted. "I never wanted to lose you. Please, I'll do anything to fix this." She closed her eyes, weariness and sorrow radiating through her. "I need time," she whispered. "I can't just forgive you for a betrayal like this, especially not while Alicia is out there, threatening to blow everything apart." A pained silence enveloped them. Then Elizabeth slipped back into the bedroom, shutting the door before David could protest. Outside, he rested his forehead against the wood, tears streaming down his face. "I'll do anything," he thought, echoing his own words. But is it too late? That night, Elizabeth didn't sleep. She lay awake, the sound of her own heartbeat too loud in her ears, her mind replaying Alicia's mocking voice. In another room, David stared into the darkness, trapped between regret for what he'd done and fear of what might come next. The Winston mansion, typically a haven of luxury and order, was now haunted by the raw spectre of betrayal, leaving both husband and wife feeling more alone than ever. The following days turned into a blur of uneasy truces and guarded conversations. David cancelled several business trips, determined to show Elizabeth he was serious about repairing their marriage. He hovered around her, offering apologies and reassurances that only sometimes broke through her emotional armor. Elizabeth, meanwhile, felt torn. Part of her yearned to believe David's repentance was genuine, that their shared history and impending parenthood could guide them through this crisis. Another part felt betrayed and furious, wanting nothing more than to vanish from the public eye and nurse her wounded heart in private. She consulted Dr. Anita Rice, her obstetrician, who noted her elevated stress levels and gently advised her to prioritize emotional well-being for the baby's sake. One late afternoon, while David was secluded in his study, Elizabeth braced herself and called Alicia. The number rang twice before a smooth voice answered. Alicia speaking. It's Elizabeth Winston, Elizabeth said, struggling to keep her tone even. We need to finish this. David told me about what happened. I'm not calling to argue. I'm calling to understand what you want. Pause, then Alicia let out a quiet laugh. What I want. Isn't it obvious? I want David to feel the fear and humiliation. He put me through. But perhaps there's something else, maybe a settlement, maybe closure. I'm not yet sure. Elizabeth swallowed her pride and mustered calm. Meet me. Just me. Let's talk openly. Away from David. Away from the city. If we can't find a resolution, we'll at least know where we stand. Alicia agreed, and they arranged a clandestine meeting at a secluded inn upstate. The choice was Elizabeth's, who wanted privacy and a neutral space. When she informed David, he blanched. You can't go alone. She's manipulative. She'll twist your words, threaten you. Elizabeth lifted her chin. I need to face her directly, for my own peace of mind. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Trust me, David, or whatever trust is left for you to give. He relented, though worry etched into his brow. He made Elizabeth promise to bring a phone with a tracking feature. Secretly, David also arranged for Jonathan Pierce's team to stand by, discreetly monitoring the meeting from a distance. On a crisp afternoon, Elizabeth drove herself to the quaint inn nestled by a lake. The horizon stretched with autumnal colors, a quiet reflection of her inner turmoil. She wore a simple navy dress and a light cardigan, her pregnant belly more pronounced by the day. Inside, the inn's lobby boasted rustic wood beams and a crackling fireplace. Alicia sat in a corner, sipping tea, poised in a white blouse and tailored trousers. Elizabeth noticed the woman's striking beauty, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, and an air of practiced composure. For a fleeting moment, Elizabeth felt an inexplicable pang of empathy. She's a person, not just a villain. They ordered tea and retreated to a small, private sitting area. Alicia began first. You must hate me. Elizabeth let out a breath. I'm hurt, furious, confused. But I also realize David played a major role. It wasn't just you. Alicia's gaze flickered with complicated emotion. So, what do you want from me? Elizabeth clasped her hands in her lap. I want an end to threats, messages, manipulations. I'm trying to save my marriage or at least find the truth. David says he regrets the affair, but you keep sending us reminders. Is money what you're after? Revenge? Alicia's lips trembled. She stared into her tea. I wanted recognition that I wasn't some disposable secret. David promised me more attention, at least a chance to see where our connection could lead. Then he cut me off. It felt like I never mattered, like I was a dirty stain on his perfect life. Elizabeth let the words settle, her heart unexpectedly softening. She's wounded too, one understand feeling discarded. But this can't go on. Tell me what you truly want, Alicia, because if it's about making David suffer, you've succeeded. Silence fell. Outside, leaves rustled in the wind. Finally, Alicia whispered, I want to start over, away from this city, but I need to know I can build a future. Your husband owes me that. Elizabeth's throat tightened. She believed Alicia was genuine, but also recognized the potential for manipulation. If we come to an agreement, something that helps you move forward, will you leave us in peace? Alicia nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. I'll sign whatever you want. I just don't want to be an afterthought he hides in the shadows. Elizabeth exhaled, feeling the tension ease, if only slightly. They discussed terms, from possible financial settlements to non-disclosure agreements. For the first time, Elizabeth glimpsed Alicia's vulnerability. A woman who truly hoped for love, now resigned to demanding restitution. Though it stung to contemplate paying off her husband's mistress, Elizabeth recognized it might be their only shot at salvaging their lives. As the afternoon waned, They parted ways. Alicia promised to review any agreement with her lawyer. Elizabeth walked out feeling drained, yet oddly calmer. The baby gave a little kick, as if to remind her of the stakes. In that quiet upstate inn, two women who once shared only a man's betrayal reached a fragile truce, knowing the real challenge lay in whether David could uphold any promise long enough to keep that peace intact. Negotiations began in earnest the next day. David's legal team prepared a draft settlement offering Alicia a substantial sum, contingent upon her permanently ceasing contact and refraining from publicizing the affair. Elizabeth felt an odd mix of revulsion and relief at the cold legal language. Robert Caldwell, David's friend, offered counsel as a mediator to ensure both parties had clarity. All the while, Elizabeth wrestled with her conscience. On one hand, she resented writing a large check to secure Alicia's silence, an ethical compromise that felt hollow. On the other hand, she recognized that Alicia's departure could restore some semblance of peace, especially as Elizabeth's due date loomed. David paced the mansion's study while his lawyer, Marion Hughes, read through the settlement line by line. "We propose a structured payment," she explained. "This way, Miss Moretti can't just vanish and later blackmail you again. If she breaches the agreement at any point, the payments stop." Elizabeth stood by the window, arms crossed. "How do we ensure she won't leak any of this to the press the moment it's signed?" Marion offered a thin smile. "The contract includes severe penalties. She stands to lose everything if she violates it. That's the best legal safeguard. Of course, if she's determined to create havoc, she might, but she'd face swift legal repercussions." David rubbed his temples, the enormity of it all weighing on him. "Let's finalize it. I just want this to end." A few days later, an elegant courier delivered the documents to Alicia's hotel. She returned them signed, with only minor revisions. A short note accompanied the packet. "Tell Elizabeth the first appreciate her compassion. I hope she can forgive us." When Elizabeth read the note, her chest constricted. Forgiveness remained elusive. She told herself that her priority was to protect her child, and that might require letting go of certain resentments. But as David tried to console her, she recoiled. Deep hurt overshadowed any immediate reconciliation. That evening, Cynthia Parker visited the mansion. She found Elizabeth in the newly finished nursery, rocking gently in a glider chair, eyes distant. "How are you holding up?" Cynthia asked, her voice gentle. Elizabeth sighed, exhausted mentally, emotionally. "The settlement is nearly done, but I still feel hollow. David's sorry, but I can't shake the image of him with her. And the baby's almost here. I'm terrified, Cyn." Cynthia crouched beside her, placing a comforting hand on Elizabeth's knee. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone in this. We're all here to support you." Tears glistened in Elizabeth's eyes. "I just wish life could be like it was before. I loved David wholeheartedly. Now I'm scared I'll never look at him the same way." Cynthia empathized with her friend's pain. She offered a kind smile. "Give it time. Betrayal leaves a scar, but sometimes scars remind us we survived. Focus on your health, your baby, and see if David truly earns back your trust." Elizabeth nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She gazed at the crib, imagining the child who would soon lie there. The one absolute she clung to was maternal love, unwavering, protective, fierce. Maybe, just maybe, that love could help her navigate the labyrinth of broken trust and uncertain hope. Meanwhile, in her hotel room, Alicia packed her belongings. The settlement funds were allocated, the legalities in place. She stared at the Manhattan skyline one last time, grappling with conflicting emotions, victory, sorrow, regret. She would leave behind a city that held her illusions, heartbreak, and grudging redemption. As she zipped her suitcase, she pondered the possibility of finding genuine love elsewhere far from David Winston's world, which had once seemed so alluring yet brought her so much despair. Tomorrow she would board a flight, carrying with her only the memory of a night in Milan and the knowledge that her path would never intersect with the Winstons again. With Alicia's departure came a temporary calm. David's attorneys confirmed that the wire transfer cleared. Marion Hughes informed him of a signed confidentiality agreement with severe penalties for non-compliance. On the surface, the Winston family crisis appeared resolved. Yet the emotional wreckage within the mansion remained. Elizabeth found herself in tears at unexpected moments, seeing David's clothes in the closet, recalling their romantic vacations, or merely passing the lounge where he once entertained Alicia's messages. David tiptoed around her, desperate to help but unsure how. His every attempt at closeness sparked a mixture of anger and longing in Elizabeth. She needed time and space to process. Enter Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a renowned therapist and counselor specializing in high-profile marital conflicts. Recommended by Robert Caldwell, Dr. Marsh conducted discreet sessions. David and Elizabeth reluctantly agreed, hoping therapy could mend the chasm that had formed between them. Their first session took place at Dr. Marsh's private suite in an unremarkable office building, chosen for its anonymity. Soft lighting, plush chairs, and tranquil music provided a soothing backdrop. Elizabeth perched on one seat, arms folded protectively across her growing belly. David sat opposite, hands clasped, glancing furtively at his wife. Dr. Marsh observed them with compassionate detachment. "Elizabeth, what would you say is the greatest barrier to moving forward right now?" Elizabeth's eyes flickered with pain. "Trust. I don't know if David's told me everything or if there are still secrets. I also feel replaced, disrespected." Her voice cracked, tears threatening to fall. David winced. "I never wanted to replace you. I was stupid, reckless. But I love you, always have." Elizabeth's tearful gaze turned to him. "Then why did you risk destroying our family?" A heavy silence ensued. David searched for an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. "I felt overwhelmed, like nothing I did was ever enough. Our life is so public, so curated. When Alicia appeared, it felt like a chance to escape the pressure, just for a moment." Dr. Marsh intervened gently. "It's crucial to acknowledge the reasons behind David's actions, but that doesn't make them justifiable. Betrayal damages relationships, and healing requires honesty, empathy, and time. Both of you need to decide if you're willing to rebuild." Elizabeth dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "I don't want my child to grow up in a broken home, but I'm afraid I'll resent David forever." David bowed his head, voice trembling. "Please, Elizabeth, give me a chance to prove I'm worth your trust. Let me earn it back." They continued discussing boundaries and coping strategies. Dr. Marsh recommended that David become more transparent, sharing phone records, daily schedules, anything Elizabeth needed to feel secure. They scheduled further sessions, both joint and individual. Back at the mansion, a subtle shift occurred. David showed Elizabeth every message he received, especially from female colleagues. He offered to drop out of any traveling deals until after the baby's birth. Small gestures, yes, but indicative of his commitment to salvage their marriage. Elizabeth remained cautious, yet she appreciated his efforts. One night, as they sat in the nursery, reading about infant care, she allowed her hand to brush his. It was not an instant fix, but a flicker of warmth. The child in her womb stirred, a reminder that love might still conquer betrayal if they both persisted. Outside, moonlight bathed the estate's manicured grounds, as if symbolizing a new dawn. Alicia was gone. The settlement was sealed. Now, all that remained was whether David and Elizabeth could find the strength and courage to rebuild, forging a path toward forgiveness and a future they had once dreamed of, untainted by secrets and lies. In the final weeks of Elizabeth's pregnancy, the Winston mansion buzzed with cautious anticipation. David grew more attentive, ensuring the house was stocked with everything Elizabeth might need. He cancelled media appearances, redirecting his focus to the impending birth. Elizabeth, though still raw from the emotional upheaval, found herself tentatively opening up to him again. The therapist's guidance, combined with David's tangible efforts, offered glimmers of hope. Still, healing was hardly linear. Elizabeth grappled with nightmares, visions of Alicia's face, of David walking away from her and the baby. At times, she lashed out in anger, throwing accusations and demands David struggled to respond to. The staff discreetly averted their eyes whenever voices were raised behind closed doors, but rumors circulated among them. They remained loyal yet concerned. One day, Gregory Winston, David's father, arrived for a surprise visit. An imposing figure with steely hair and a commanding presence, Gregory had been out of the country handling a critical legal matter. He immediately sensed the tension in his son's home. "What's all this, David?" Gregory asked after dinner, stepping into the study where father and son shared brandy. "You two look haunted." David contemplated telling his father everything but hesitated. Gregory was old-fashioned, fiercely protective of the Winston name. Finally, David revealed the affair in halting sentences, concluding with Alicia's exit and the settlement. Gregory's face darkened. "A Winston's loyalty is paramount, David. Your mother and I always emphasized this. How could you endanger Elizabeth, especially in her condition?" David's shoulders slumped. "I know. I failed her. I'm trying to fix it." Gregory sipped his brandy, eyes flint hard. Fixing it means ensuring it never happens again. That woman might be gone, but the memory remains. You'd better treat Elizabeth with unwavering devotion from now on. Do you understand? David nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He felt both ashamed and somewhat relieved that his father knew. Perhaps having Gregory's stern counsel might keep him anchored. "I swear I will," he managed quietly. A few days later, the baby shower Elizabeth had initially postponed was rescheduled. Close friends, Cynthia Parker, Robert Caldwell, and others gathered in the mansion's grand garden. Balloons and flower arrangements brightened the lawns. Music floated on the breeze, and a catered buffet offered delicate pastries and fruit. Despite her inner turmoil, Elizabeth played the gracious hostess, genuinely smiling for the first time in weeks. Halfway through the event, when guests were mingling, Elizabeth felt a sharp twinge in her abdomen. She blinked, unsure if it was just a strong Braxton Hicks contraction. She excused herself to the restroom, gripping Cynthia's hand for support. Another jolt of pain ripped through her, more intense this time. Panic laced her voice. This might be early labor." "It's too soon. I'm only 36 weeks. Cynthia quickly fetched David, who rushed to Elizabeth's side, his heart pounding. The staff alerted the driver, and within minutes they were en route to the hospital. Guests murmured anxiously, some following behind in their own cars. In the hospital's bright maternity ward, medical personnel swiftly monitored Elizabeth and the baby. The doctors confirmed early labor had begun. Anxiety gnawed at Elizabeth. Was the baby developed enough? Would stress from the recent chaos affect the delivery? David held her hand, tears wetting his cheeks. "You'll be okay," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm here. I won't leave you." Amid contractions and the fourth drips, Elizabeth clung to his words. Despite everything, she still loved him. Whether she could forgive him, fully and forever, remained uncertain. But in that moment, frightened, vulnerable, and on the brink of motherhood, she chose to trust he would stay by her side. Outside, a nurse quietly prepared for the arrival of a new life, a life that might well mend shattered hearts if given half a chance. Elizabeth's labor was arduous, but ultimately successful. After hours of contractions, excruciating pain, and fearful anticipation, she gave birth to a baby girl, Charlotte Grace Winston. The newborn's cries filled the hospital room, a wail that both signaled life and offered a promise of hope. Elizabeth, exhausted and drenched in sweat, gazed down at the tiny, wrinkled face with tears streaming freely. David stood beside her, heart swelling with gratitude and relief. He gently kissed Elizabeth's forehead, words failing him in the presence of such profound emotion. Nurses bustled around them, cleaning and weighing Charlotte, then bringing the swaddled infant back to her mother's arms. In the following days, Elizabeth stayed in a private recovery suite. Friends and family arrived with flowers and well wishes, a tapestry of smiles and subdued excitement. Cynthia Parker cooed over the baby, tears shining in her eyes. Gregory Winston even cracked a rare, genuine grin, gently patting David on the back. For Elizabeth, the experience of motherhood was transcendent. In every gentle inhale and exhale of Charlotte's sleeping form, she found a sense of calm that had eluded her for weeks. Yet the ache of David's betrayal remained, a wound that still needed healing. Dr. Marsh visited them in the hospital, quietly offering postpartum support and reminding them to continue therapy if they hoped to safeguard their marriage. On their final day at the hospital, David helped Elizabeth into a wheelchair, cradling Charlotte in his arms. Reporters from local tabloids hovered outside, hoping for a photo of the wealthy Winston family's new addition. Security escorted them to the car, and soon they were headed home. Back at the mansion, staff had transformed the nursery into a serene oasis, soft pastel walls, a plush rocking chair, and a crib draped with a delicate canopy. Elizabeth gently placed Charlotte in the crib, tears welling up again as she marveled at her daughter's fragility. David stood by, a quiet sentinel. Later that evening, with Charlotte asleep, Elizabeth found David in the sitting room. He stared at the fireplace, unlit yet central to the space. She approached him, baby monitor in hand. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm still hurt, still angry. But I see how much you love Charlotte and me." David turned to her, his eyes damp. "I do love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make you feel safe again." She sank onto the sofa, resting the monitor on a side table. "I don't know when I'll completely forgive you. Maybe it'll take months or years. But Charlotte deserves parents who try." He sat beside her, reaching for her hand. This time, she allowed it. "I want to be here for both of you," he murmured. "I want to be a better man than the one who met Alicia in Milan." Elizabeth exhaled, releasing a fraction of the tension she carried. "We'll keep seeing Dr. Marsh. We'll keep talking. No more secrets. That's the only way." In the subdued light of that evening, with the hush of a sleeping infant close by, husband and wife forged an unspoken pact. Neither was naive enough to believe the road ahead would be smooth. Distrust and heartbreak would not vanish overnight. But they shared a mutual determination to protect their child, to rediscover the love that once united them, and to prove that even after betrayal, a marriage could grow strong roots if nurtured with honesty and care. Outside, moonlight draped the estate's gardens in a silver glow. For all the wealth and pomp that defined the Winston name, it was the tiny heartbeat in the nursery and the fragile bond between David and Elizabeth that truly mattered now. Alicia Moretti had become a memory, a chapter they could never erase, but perhaps learn from. As the hours turned to dawn, the Winston family began a new story, one of quiet resilience, cautious trust, and a future brimming with both uncertainty and possibility. Forgiveness is neither quick nor simple. It's a path paved by honesty, remorse, and the willingness to build anew. For David and Elizabeth Winston, a single gift revealed more than deception. It exposed how fragile even the most gilded lives can be. Alicia Moretti's departure offered only temporary respite. The real work began in the aftermath, as they strove to mend their bond for the sake of baby Charlotte and the promises they once made. If this tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption resonated with you, show your support by liking this video, sharing it with others who appreciate deeply human stories, and subscribing for more compelling narratives. Together, we'll explore the delicate threads that tie us to each other and ask what it truly takes to find hope amid the rubble of our mistakes. Your engagement means the world. Thank you for becoming part of this unfolding story.